Hi everyone, welcome back, and this is my second video for the day. And yes, this video is technical and it's for all the business analysts out there. So this video is about the popular requirement gathering techniques and when you can use which type of a technique. So let's get into it. So the very first technique is interviews. So interviews tend to be the most super useful technique that you can use to gather requirements. Why? Because you have the person who you want to interview, the clients or the stakeholders, you get that time to individually ask the questions you want to ask them, to clarify your doubts, to follow up certain other questions. You have all the liberty to kind of get the maximum amount of requirements with the interviewers. And this is going to be a perfect technique that you can use in scenarios where you have the clients there along with you, where you can gather requirements. The second technique out there is questionnaires. Now, when could you go with questionnaires? So, questionnaires are more super useful when you have a larger audience who you need to gather requirements from or you need to collect information from. At that time, having individual interviews does not seem to be feasible and would really require a lot of effort. So at that time, going in with questionnaires tends to be the best option with a minimal amount of effort. But when you're sending out questionnaires, you need to keep three things in mind. Make sure you don't overload the users with a lot of questions. The second one is when you're sending out a questionnaire, make sure you ask the right questions. Always avoid leading questions. Try to ask open-ended questions. For example, if you're asking a leading question such as, "Did you like the export functionality?" Then the users are kind of obliged, or they think in the direction of only the export functionality, which they might say, "Yes, I did like the export function or the export feature." But when you ask open-ended questions as to which features did you like the most, people are going to come up with you with a number of features that they liked or they disliked. In this way, you're getting more amount of information. So when you use questionnaires, make sure that you ask the right questions and put them in the right format, and you would get the best responses out of it. Also, in questionnaires, the one drawback in this is that you would not be able to kind of follow up with other questions. Sometimes when you have an interview, you have a question with a client, the client answers that question, it becomes really interesting, you have certain doubts regarding that question, and you kind of drive the conversation to clarify the doubt. But when you're going with questionnaires, you kind of don't have that amount of liberty to follow up questions. It's just some questions that you want to get out from the user, high level questions. Questionnaires tend to be really useful apart from reaching larger audience. It's also useful when you want to collect certain information that is really not very critical or really detailed. For example, you just want to know the number of features that users are using. So you just send out questionnaires asking random questions as to which features you like the most, which features would you like to have more in the future. So based on these responses, you will be able to prioritize your existing features or come up with new features. So at that time, questionnaires tend to be super useful. The third technique in which you can use to gather requirements is by user observations. Now, user observations, if you have come across this technique, is where you observe the user as to how they currently do their particular job or how they kind of execute their tasks in a particular situation. So this is helpful when you have the users onboarded, when you have the users on site. So when you really have the users along with you is when you can use this particular technique of just observing your clients or users as to how they are using your software, how they are using the tool, what are the different difficulties they face, what are the different experiences they have. So based on this, you can kind of identify what really is needed, where do they have some problem, and you would be able to get some information and gather some requirements. For example, when you have users working with your tool and you kind of observe them, take this scenario. Like you have built an application for a call center where they need to track calls and information regarding each call. So initially you have just a software where based on the call you have this text box where users can just enter their information. But when you actually sat with the users, you came to know that there's so much of information that can be pre-filled, but you're just giving them a text box where they need to enter all the details, and sometimes they even miss entering the actual details which are important. So by knowing what difficulties they face, by sitting along with them, by observing, you tend to gather a lot of information and you tend to improvise on that. And the fourth technique is user story workshops. So this is the agile way of gathering requirements is with user stories. So the very way of gathering user stories is that it's gathered all the way in the different phases of the project. Okay, there's no hard and fast rule that you have to gather requirements only at the initial phase. But when you want to start off with a feature, when you want to kickstart an initiative, okay, this user story workshop tends to be super useful. That's where you sit down with all the stakeholders of the product. You have the development team, you have the product team, you have the user team, the customers, and all the possible users in your team. They sit down and they kind of take up that particular feature or an initiative, and they kind of brainstorm and they put all possible user stories that can come up. Now, in this phase, you needn't kind of really go to the details of what a particular user story needs to do and in detail. The main idea is that you come up with a list of user stories, and then you can prioritize the user stories, and then you can start drilling down. So this really works when you want to gather, this technique works when you want to gather as many user stories as you can regarding a particular feature. This way, by doing this, you will be able to get perspectives from different teams. So you would get perspectives from the customer side, you would come up with business requirements, technical teams might come up with technical nuances to that particular feature, which leads to spikes or to technical stories. So this becomes really super useful in situations like this. So depending on which situation you are and what is the objective, you can use these requirement gathering techniques, and I hope that it would be useful, definitely. If you choose these ways and techniques when based on your situation, it would definitely be helpful to you also. So I hope that you like this video, and I hope this was something useful to you. So if you like this video, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.